Have you ever stopped to wonder why, in an era where you literally have the entire sum of human knowledge sitting right in your pocket, we actually seem to be getting worse at making sense of it all?
Yeah, it's quite the paradox, isn't it?
I mean, think about it. We are statistically the most educated generation in human history. We have access to more data in a single day than our ancestors had in a lifetime. But, if you look around, it often feels like we're just voluntarily surrendering our ability to make basic independent decisions.
Right, we're letting algorithms and, well, just the loudest voices in the room do all our thinking for us.
Exactly. It's like waking up and realizing the compass you've been using to navigate the world
Yeah.
is actually just pointing to whatever is currently trending. Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive.
Yes, unpacking the YouTube video by the Psyche, titled Why Critical Thinking is Disappearing.
Right, and specifically this phenomenon that philosophers are calling collective stupidity. And, before anyone gets defensive, this isn't an insult about your IQ.
No, not at all. It's really not about raw intelligence dropping.
Yeah, we're talking about a systemic decline in critical thinking, the mechanisms that cause masses of people to adopt really shallow thinking, blindly accept narratives, and surrender their intellectual independence, usually without even realizing it's happening.
And to really understand how this happens, we have to start at the biological level.
Yeah.
Because you can't analyze society without first looking at the physical constraints of your own brain.
Right, the overwhelmed brain.
Exactly. The neuroscientist Daniel Levitin has studied this extensively, and the data is just staggering. The average person today processes 5 times more information per day than someone living just a few decades ago.
Wait, 5 times.
5 times.
Let that sink in for a second. Every single ping on your phone, every breaking news ticker, targeted ads, hot takes on social media, your brain is just constantly being asked to evaluate this relentless tsunami of input.
And the human mind simply did not evolve to handle that volume of stimulus.
Yeah.
So to cope with it, the brain has to rely on its internal architecture.
Which brings us to Daniel Kahneman, right? His book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Kahneman famously categorized the brain into 2 systems. System 1 is your fast system. It's instinctive, highly emotional, super quick, and it relies entirely on mental shortcuts.
Heuristics, I think they're called.
Right, heuristics. And then system 2 is the slow system. This is your deliberate, analytical, logical processor.
The catch being that System 2 is an absolute energy hog.
Oh, massively.
Like, to actually sit down and deeply analyze a complex problem, it requires immense metabolic energy. It physically tires you out.
Oh.
So because of this daily 5 times normal information overload, our brains are perpetually maxed out.
Yeah, we're stuck in fast mode.
It makes me think of having a web browser open with like 500 tabs running at the exact same time. The internal memory is completely overwhelmed, so to prevent a total system crash, the computer just freezes up the heavy applications and defaults to the most basic low-energy functions.
That is a perfect analogy. The brain does the exact same thing. When those 500 tabs are open, it locks out the slow analytical system because it just can't afford the energy expenditure.
So we're just trapped in survival mode.
Right. And one of the most powerful heuristics or shortcuts that the fast system relies on is social proof.
Social proof.
Oh,
We see that everywhere online, don't we?
oh, constantly.
It's the assumption that, if a post has 200,000 likes or a video has 5 million views, the information inside it must be accurate or at least culturally important.
Because historically, social proof is an evolutionary survival mechanism. If you saw the rest of your tribe running in one direction, you didn't stop to critically analyze the environment for a predator.
Right? You didn't pull out a clipboard and start taking notes. You just ran with them.
Exactly. But today, the predators and threats are abstract. They're complex political policies, economic shifts, social issues. The exhausted brain looks around for cues from the herd, from influencers, or perceived authorities.
And if everyone else is outraged, the fast brain just bypasses logic and adopts the consensus to stay safe. Which brings up a slightly uncomfortable question for you listening right now.
Oh, this is a good one.
When was the last time you read a full, nuanced article from start to finish without checking a notification? Or, when was the last time you saw a highly provocative headline and actually pause to question its premise before forming an opinion?
It's incredibly difficult to do in the modern world. We are biologically overwhelmed, but the real tragedy is that this vulnerability is actively exploited by the systems we interact with every single day.
Right, the systems guarding the trap. Let's dig into those, starting with the tech. The neuroscientist Marianne Wolf studies how digital media is actively rewiring our neural pathways, right?
Yes, physically rewiring the brain. Because we are constantly jumping between tabs, skimming bullet points, scrolling endlessly, we're literally losing the cognitive muscle memory required for deep reading.
And if you can't sustain deep attention, you just can't engage in critical thinking. I mean, you can't analyze a multifaceted global conflict in a 15-second video.
You really can't. And Marshall McLuhan warned us about this back in the 1960s. He had that famous phrase, "The medium is the message."
The medium is a message, yeah.
He argued that the method through which we receive information dictates how we are able to think about it. And our modern mediums are explicitly engineered to encourage speed over depth. They reward immediate, visceral outrage over careful nuance.
And this is exactly how Noam Chomsky's concept of the manufacturing of consent operates today.
Absolutely.
Because when you hear that phrase, manufacturing consent, it sounds like some shadowy cabal in a smoke-filled room dictating what the public thinks. But the mechanism is actually much more banal.
It's just a structural reality.
Right. If you have a population whose brains are wired to skim, who are trapped in fast-thinking mode, and who rely on social proof, whoever controls the headline controls reality. Power structures don't need to force you to comply.
No, they just present a simplified, emotionally charged narrative to an exhausted populace.
And the public manufactures its own consent by sharing it, liking it, and, policing anyone who disagrees.
A distracted populace is an easily managed populace. But we have to acknowledge that the conditioning for this compliance begins long before anyone downloads a social media app. It's poured into the foundation of our traditional education system.
Okay, wait, I have to push back here for a second, because this is where I think a lot of people might get tripped up.
Sure, what's the pushback?
When we talk about traditional schooling, we are talking about institutions that teach advanced mathematics, literature, physics, coding, and we have standardized tests designed to measure intelligence and problem-solving skills.
Right.
So how can the award-winning teacher John Taylor Gatto argue that this system is actively suppressing intelligence? I mean, isn't mastering those subjects the literal definition of getting smarter?
Well, it's the definition of acquiring knowledge.
Yeah.
But acquiring knowledge is not the same thing as critical thinking. Gatto's thesis focuses on the underlying structure of compulsory schooling.
It's the structure itself.
Yes. Think about the mechanics of a traditional classroom, which was largely modeled during the industrial age. You have rigid schedules dictated by bells. You have authoritative figures dispensing absolute facts that cannot be challenged.
You memorize it, regurgitate it on a test, and then forget it for the next module.
Precisely. You taught what to think about, but rarely how to construct your own independent framework for evaluating truth. Children who constantly question the premise of the lesson are usually labeled as disruptive.
So the system rewards conformity and predictability.
It was originally designed to create compliant factory workers who could follow instructions without causing friction on the assembly line.
And even though the factories are mostly gone, that software is still running in our heads. Like you graduate, but you just swap the teacher for a corporate boss or a political party or an algorithmic feed.
Exactly. You learn early on that questioning the established consensus carries a tangible penalty. It costs you your grade in school, and it can cost you your social standing as an adult.
So people just learn to keep their heads down. But silence, over time, metabolizes into complicity.
It does. You stop internally questioning the narrative because the friction of doing so is simply too high.
Which brings us to the most difficult part of this whole equation, the emotional cost. Because we have the biological overwhelm, the technological slot machines in our pockets, the education system. But even when you recognize all of that, why don't we just snap out of it?
Because breaking free isn't just an intellectual puzzle. It's an emotional and psychological minefield. Engaging in true critical thinking requires confronting your own ego.
And the ego has some incredibly robust defense mechanisms.
Oh, very robust. The first one is confirmation bias.
Right, where the brain actively defends its accepted beliefs regardless of new evidence. Like it will seek out that one obscure article that validates its worldview and completely ignore a mountain of data that challenges it.
Because admitting you were wrong feels like a tiny psychological death. And then you add the phenomenon of groupthink, which was coined by the social psychologist Irving Janis.
Groupthink, it's fascinating.
It really is. It's this intense, almost gravitational pull toward harmony within a group. Janice showed how groups of highly intelligent experts will routinely make completely irrational, disastrous decisions simply because they suppress their own dissenting thoughts.
Just to preserve the unity of the group, it feels more important than finding the objective truth.
Exactly. And to understand the depths of this, we have to look at the philosopher Erich Fromm and his work, Escape from Freedom. Fromm argued that humanity actually possesses a deep, subconscious dread of true intellectual freedom.
A dread of freedom, that sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but think about it. Freedom of thought means you are the sole architect of your reality. If you make a choice independently, you are entirely accountable for the consequences. You can't blame the culture or the state or your parents.
The accountability is crushing. It's like the terror of the blank canvas. If someone tells you what to paint, you might hate the painting, but at least you aren't responsible for the concept.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it. Many secretly prefer to surrender this freedom to the crowd because outsourcing your autonomy is a fantastic way to cure your anxiety.
It's the ultimate comfort of the collective, which ties into what Carl Jung said, right? That people will do anything to avoid facing their own souls.
Yes. Over time, we intertwine our personal identities so deeply with our ideologies that they become indistinguishable.
It's exactly like wearing the jersey of your favorite Sparks team.
Oh, totally.
Like if I come up to you and say, hey, I've been looking at the data and your team's defensive stats are objectively terrible this year, you don't process that as a statistical analysis.
No, you register it as a personal attack.
Right. You hear, you are terrible. When we treat our political affiliations or social stances like sports jerseys, having an objective Socratic dialogue is impossible. Every debate is perceived as a fight for survival.
But you are not your ideas. Society just trains us to believe that we are. And history bears witness to the brutal cost of decoupling yourself from the crowd. Think of the great disruptors: Galileo, Darwin, Nietzsche, Martin Luther King Jr.
They were all rejected, ridiculed, or worse by the collective ignorance of their eras.
Because they didn't just disagree, their very existence threatened the ego of the collective. In a modern culture that worships absolute certainty, simply saying the words "I don't know" is perceived as a weakness.
But admitting you don't know is the foundation of learning.
Exactly. Real critical thought requires a tolerance for ambiguity. You risk being misunderstood. You risk being ostracized by your own tribe.
Intellectual doubt becomes a radical act of rebellion.
It really does.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the pathology. We have the cognitive overload, the systemic conditioning, the emotional barrier of the ego. We need the antidote. How do you actually reclaim your mind?
The path forward requires cultivating what philosophers describe as the quiet rebellion of the mind. And the foundational tool here is a practice called metacognition.
Metacognition, thinking about your own thinking.
Exactly. It's the practice of becoming an active observer of your own internal processes. For example, when you read a headline that instantly makes your blood boil, metacognition is the ability to step outside of that anger for just a millisecond.
You observe the emotion without immediately acting on it.
Yes. You ask yourself, why did this specific phrasing trigger me? Am I reacting to facts, or am I reacting to the tone? Am I genuinely open to the possibility that my outrage is misplaced?
It's creating a buffer zone between the stimulus and your response. And another crucial tool we found in the research is dialectical thinking.
Right, the mental stamina to hold two opposing ideas in tension.
Without immediately needing to pick a side, moving past that rigid us versus them mentality. Like if you're looking at a contested social policy, dialectical thinking allows you to say, well, the proponents have a valid point about economic growth, but the critics also have a completely valid point about environmental degradation.
And you sit in that uncomfortable gray area and explore the friction, rather than just putting on a jersey and screaming at the other side.
It requires immense intellectual humility.
It does. It echoes Socrates' foundational rule. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. That wasn't just a self-deprecating joke. It was a deliberate, rigorous methodology.
Because if you assume your knowledge is incomplete, you remain curious. You become immune to the arrogance of the fast-thinking brain.
Precisely.
And I want to remind everyone listening, practicing this isn't just a personal hack. It's a public service. If everyone around you suddenly believes something without question, that is your cue to hit the brakes.
Not to automatically rebel just to be edgy, but to conduct an honest investigation.
Right. Because the future stability of society depends on the quality of its thought, not the volume of its opinions.
The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most analytical. The philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti observed that to truly understand the immeasurable complexities of life, The mind must be extraordinarily quiet and still.
Which is the polar opposite of the digital world we've built.
Completely. True thinkers cultivate silence. They do the demanding emotional work of detaching their self-worth from their current beliefs. This is why critical thinking is ultimately described as a spiritual act.
A spiritual act. I love that.
It's honoring objective truth over the warmth of group comfort, choosing the pain of growth over the stagnation of certainty. It's the quiet, courageous decision to live with your eyes wide open.
Even when reality is incredibly uncomfortable to look at. Let's pull all these threads together as we wrap up.
Sounds good.
We started by looking at the biological limits of our brains, how that 5 times multiplier of daily information traps us in Kahneman's fast-thinking mode.
Forcing us to rely on social proof just to survive the day.
Right. And we saw how digital media and the industrial roots of our education system exploit that exhaustion, training us to skim, comply, and conform.
And of course, the intense psychological mechanisms from confirmation bias to the fear of freedom that keep us clinging to those ideological sports jerseys.
So the overarching takeaway here is that no algorithm, no viral trend, and no crowd can ever replace the quiet certainty of your own well-examined inner voice.
The responsibility to build, refine, and protect that voice rests entirely on your shoulders.
Which brings us to our call to action for you today. We want you to actively practice that metacognition we just talked about. The very next time you feel an instant angry reaction to a headline or a post, force yourself to pause.
Interrupt the fast brain.
Exactly. Engage the slow brain and ask yourself, who benefits from my reaction right now?
It is a profound circuit breaker. It forces you to look at the underlying mechanics of the information, rather than just blindly absorbing its emotional payload.
And as we end this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. It builds on everything we've discussed about how closely we tie our egos to our ideologies.
Let's hear it.
If our identities are so heavily wrapped up in our current beliefs, imagine for a second that every single opinion you hold right now was suddenly wiped completely blank. Without your political views, your social stances, or your preferred narratives, who would you actually be?
Wow. That is a staggering question to sit with.
And what would be the very first thing you'd choose to believe on your own? It's the ultimate blank canvas, because until you figure that out, you might still be relying on a compass that's just spinning in circles, pointing to whatever the crowd wants you to see.
Find your true north.
Exactly. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.